Hello, my name is Rhonda Hackworth. I'm Associate Professor of Music at the Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers University. In this video, I would like to present some research findings about vocal health. Vocal health research that is related to teachers in general, some that is related to music teachers specifically, and also a few research studies that I have completed that contribute to the larger body of work on this growing topic. This is an area of great interest to me. I have never personally had a voice disorder, but I know so many people who do, and my area of research focuses on teachers and their vocal health. So I spend a lot of time speaking at conferences to practicing teachers. I also like to talk with pre-service teachers and get you to start thinking about your vocal health right now and how you might preserve it. We are, all of us who are teachers, a part of a group called professional voice users, just simply meaning you can't do your job without your voice. Someone who works in a factory can get their job completely done in an 8-hour shift and never speak a word. And that's not the case for music teachers. So it probably wouldn't be surprising for me to tell you that teaching is an occupation that is at high risk for voice disorders. The problem, unfortunately, seems to be increasing over time and not getting better. Compared to people in other professions, teachers tend to be more likely to have voice problems either in the past or currently. They're more likely to miss work due to their voice problems. And we'll come back to that in a minute. This is teachers in general, not necessarily music teachers. Teachers are more likely to seek a physician's care for their voice than people who are not teachers, and they're more likely to consider a possible career change as a result of having a voice disorder. Now, teachers who are music teachers, I said teachers in general tend to miss work more often. What I have found in my research is that music teachers sometimes do not miss work because maybe the concert is coming up in 3 days and they don't trust that a substitute can take over where they have left off. So they will work in spite of being sick, and sometimes that complicates the voice disorder even more. So I have done quite a bit of research asking pre-service teachers and practicing teachers about their opinions related to vocal health, and one of the studies that I did a while back, I surveyed 659 experienced and pre-service teachers and asked them if they would rate some behaviors as either healthy or unhealthy on a Likert scale. So it was a 7-point scale with 1 being unhealthy behavior and 7 being completely healthy. And here are the results. We've got the top 3 healthiest behavior. And I split the teacher groups into novice teachers, which would be pre-service, no teaching experience yet. Early career, which is usually about the first 10 years of teaching, and then late career, so 11 years plus. All 3 groups said that the number 3, this is like a Letterman top 10, so the number 3 is getting adequate sleep. That's a very healthy behavior. Number 2, warming up your voice, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. And the number 1 healthy behavior was drinking water, and all 3 groups agreed to all of those. Then the unhealthiest behaviors, the third, they believed that it was acid reflux disease, which was one of the choices. The second was secondhand smoke, and probably not surprising, the number 1 unhealthy behavior for your voice, they said, all 3 groups, was smoking. I also asked them how many of them were currently or in the past experiencing a vocal problem. And in the novice group, 5% of the teachers said that they were having a problem. In early career, 22%. And in late career, a very large 46% of the teachers said they had some type of voice disorder. This could be a diagnosed or an undiagnosed disorder. So then I asked them, well, what teaching activities do you think or do you associate the most with vocal stress? So just like the behaviors, now we're switched into teaching activities. All three groups said that the number 3 most stressful activity was giving any type of verbal instructions while students were playing. This could be students playing in band rehearsal, orchestra rehearsal, or a room full of students playing classroom instruments. Any type of verbal instruction that they were trying to give while that was going on, they feel like is very stressful. Then for the practicing teachers, the number 2 stressful activity was lunch duty, which is a very noisy thing to have to do. The novice group, it came out in the other category, and I realized once I started looking at the data on this that I had failed to put marching band down as a category. So when they checked other, I always wanted to know what was that, and it was overwhelmingly marching band. So of course, trying to be out in the field and give any type of verbal instruction over marching band is going to be very stressful on the voice. And the number 1 teaching activity that was the most stressful to all 3 groups was speaking over noisy classroom conditions. And these are things that teachers typically have no control over. Construction outside on the school, so there might be a jackhammer on the sidewalk right outside your classroom, or just noise in the hallway, a rattling air conditioning unit in your classroom, some kind of fan, all of those types of things. And I think that teachers feel that this is the most stressful because a lot of times, like I said, they have no power to change these things. Another project that I did for a research project was called the Vocal Health Project. This was a group of 76 teachers that I asked to keep vocal logs for 8 weeks. And there were 3 groups in this study. There was what I call the vocal hygiene group. They kept their daily log for all 8 weeks. And in week 3, they came to a workshop on vocal hygiene instruction. And if you haven't heard the term vocal hygiene before, you may have heard the term dental hygiene, which is how to take care of your teeth. And so vocal hygiene is nothing more than taking care of your voice. The second group was called the behavior modification group. And they also kept the daily log for 8 weeks. They also came to the workshop on vocal hygiene. And once that workshop was over, they stayed for an additional workshop on behavior modification. And the control group also kept the daily log for 8 weeks. And that was the only contribution that they had during the study. And the results I found were we had no changes in behaviors. They were checking off things on that daily log that they did and participated in. And so there was no change in any behavior for that group that just came to the vocal hygiene workshop. The small changes that we found were in the behavior modification group. That group took significantly more vocal breaks than the other experimental group or the control group. And the reason that they might have taken those vocal breaks is in the behavioral workshop, they were asked to identify something that they felt was standing in their way to good vocal health and make a plan for how to work through that and try and change that behavior. So if it is quite possible that many of them decided that taking a vocal break was something that they needed to try to do more of, and they did that for the remaining weeks 4 through 8. The other small significant change we found was that this behavior modification group ended up reporting fewer vocal problems than the other groups. It could be that they didn't have a lot of vocal problems to begin with. That's information that we didn't really have enough data on, but it is still a significant change that we saw. So then I had the question, after I had done these other 2 studies, are music teachers more susceptible to voice disorders than other types of teachers? So I embarked on a new study where I was looking at the prevalence of vocal problems. And this time I enlisted the help of speech-language pathologists because they tell me that their largest client base is unfortunately teachers. So I worked with about 10 of them and called them my experts for this study. There were 41 teachers who participated. 23 of them were music teachers and 18 were not music teachers. And I asked them to read a poem while they were being audio recorded. And I asked them to read it as if they were addressing their class in reading the poem. I did not have these teachers sing anything because roughly half of them were not music teachers. I was worried that if I asked them to sing, I was going to get nervousness in the voices and that would complicate the results. So I just had them read a poem. And there were 9 licensed speech pathologists who listened to those recordings. And I asked them to listen and rate what they felt like the voice, whether it was healthy or unhealthy at any given time. And they were using a dial that records data in the moment. So if the voice sounded healthy at the very beginning, and as the person read, it began to sound unhealthy, they could move the dial towards unhealthy back and forth. So the results that I found, a little bit surprising, but there were absolutely no significant differences between the music teachers and the non-music teachers. What we did find was that there was a lot of individual variation. And although that variation didn't show any trends for one group or the other, it definitely pointed out how personal and individualized vocal hygiene is for teachers. So as I started thinking about this, I thought that really does make a lot of sense because your voice is quite a personal part of yourself, and taking care of it can vary from person to person. So the suggestions that I made for future research here is to try to include ways to best help teachers manage those individual problems. And an interesting thing that I found was when I started looking at the data closely, I noticed that each teacher got an overall average score, and we put them in order. And the music teacher that had the highest rating, meaning this was the music teacher that the speech pathologist felt like had the healthiest sounding voice. I compared that person to the music teacher that had the lowest rating, the one that they felt sounded the unhealthiest. Both of those teachers were female vocalists. Both were in the same age range. Both had roughly the same amount of experience, one teaching high school choir, one teaching elementary music, but more than 10 years. And they both were diagnosed with a vocal problem. Now, the vocal problems were different, but the person who sounded the healthiest to these speech pathologists had a diagnosed vocal problem. And the person who sounded the unhealthiest also had a diagnosed vocal problem. And it could be that the way that they were taking care of themselves was vastly different. It could be that their bodies responded in a different way to therapy. Who knows? But it is kind of fascinating that this result came out. So then I looked at the non-music teachers. I wanted to know, how did they compare? And that non-music teacher that had the highest rating, I compared to the non-music teacher who had the lowest rating, and they also, on paper, looked like almost the same person. Female, roughly the same age, they've got roughly the same amount of experience, and neither of these women had any vocal problem diagnosed. So that just tells me that this is incredibly individualized. There is no one-size-fits-all. There's no way to write, these are the things, these are definitely the things you should do to combat vocal health, or to increase your vocal health. But what it has to be is individualized and asking people to really think about what works or does not work for them.